just my opinion, but I think you'll be hard pressed to find a better decade of original storytelling and original cinema than the decade of the 90s through to the millennia. It makes the current generation of this constant retelling, reshaping and redoing pale in comparison with its original and dynamic storylines, character development and some wonderful musical accompaniments. And yet there were some titles of that decade that we'd sooner rather forget. There was also some titles and films that could have slipped through our collective net and we wasn't able maybe to appreciate them for what they were worth at the time. But I was sorting through some old junk the other day and I stumbled across a DVD. For those too young to remember what they are or life before streaming, it was a digital video disc. And sure, it wasn't as quick as streaming, but then again you didn't get the... And then the worst thing you'd have to do is just keep skipping scenes and fast forward until your thumb hurt. But I found this DVD of probably one of the best titles to come out of this period in my opinion, and that is The Devil's Advocate. It had a star-studded cast with the likes of a very young and handsome dapper Keanu Reeves, a young beautiful Charlize Theron, and also a monster performance by Al Pacino. I guess it was positioned as a horror slash kind of thriller, but it was very much different from the horrors that we've got used to these days with like Paranormal Activity 13 and we played with a Ouija board, oh shit, and we moved into a house and it turns out to be haunted. It really went back to the roots maybe of storytelling in this dualistic nature, a very religious kind of adaptation of good versus evil or the struggle for good when there's evil present. And it's a very interesting film and it's inspired this video today. Some anecdotes, some observations and perhaps how it could apply in a practical, more applicable sense to day-to-day life today. Don't want to have to do a disclaimer, there will be some spoilers, but come on, it came out 25 years ago. But it is out there to watch and I would highly recommend it if you haven't. Don't need to watch it, but there will be some spoilers. And plus, if you can't work out just by the title and the casting what's going to happen, well, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. No offence.
The newest attorney at the world's most powerful law firm has never lost a case, but he's about to lose his soul. You're introduced first of all to this character of Kevin, and Kevin is this cool, young, slick, with his southern charm, district attorney, and he's really the archetype of a young man trying to make it in that hustle and bustle of trying to make something of his life. For men, honour and reputation is a massive, massive thing. And I guess there's no greater example than this, than the archetype of Kevin, a man who's hungry to succeed and succeed at all costs. In fact, when he's first introduced, he is defending a nonce on a charge, and he happens to realise and pick up on his client's guilt as the witness or the victim has given their testimony. After a very small, mild dilemma, a moral dilemma, he then goes back and wins the case. He's never lost a case. Important part to remember. Never lost a case. Always wins at all costs.
Speculation, however, was widespread that the young lawyer's unblemished string of victories would come to an end in this courtroom.
One thing you pick up immediately from the dialogue between the characters and the character development is the love between Kevin and his wife. His young wife, played by Charlize Theron, is this young southern girl, very loyal, very devoted. This young relationship full of love, full of promise, and he puts the idea to her that they're going to potentially uproot and move from where they are. So there's an element of her that perhaps is curious by this new way of living, which is so different from where they are at the moment.
All expenses, first class, travel and lodging, you and your wife.
Oh my God.
Much to the dismay of his mother. Now his mother is again an archetypical woman of a religious worldview, a very old style worldview.
She's a preacher's daughter. She's tough. She's worked at the same poultry plant for as long as I can remember. She's got a church she really likes, so she's usually either there or they go out. They do a lot of volunteer work.
Where she has her reservations about Kevin going into the city. In fact, she calls it Babylon.
Welcome to Babylon, Ma.
She doesn't want to see a young boy who's somewhat drifted away from this Christian worldview and no longer maybe practicing the same sort of religious practices that his mother does. Much to her disappointment or much to her fear, they decide to uproot.
Didn't rub off? The book? The church?
No, I'm on parole. Early release for time served.
If you're going to cast someone to be the devil, the archetypal devil role, I don't think there's a better character in this instance than Al Pacino, and he really does just smash this performance out of the park. Because Al Pacino doesn't necessarily have the biggest of statures. He's quite a small man. He's not the broadest of mans either. However, the presence that he lacks physically, he makes up in his mannerisms, his charm and his charisma. It's almost to go underneath the radar to not be noticed.
Don't ever let him see you coming. That's the gaff, my friend. You gotta keep yourself small, innocuous. You be the little guy. You know, the nerd, the leper, shit-kicking surfer.
And the character interplay between Kevin and John, Al Pacino and Keanu, it literally has this great back and forth where oftentimes you'll see Keanu Reeves do this little smile when John Milton or Al Pacino baits him and teases him. And the devil understands the carnal mind of man so well that he knows the move before the moves are played out. He's 1 or 2 or 10 steps ahead of you on the game of chess. And you get this feel about the dialogue between Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves throughout the whole of the film, that he's getting moved along and herded without even realising. And as the story goes on, of course, you know, he realises that this job that looks like it's made in heaven for him and his wife is really, you know, made in hell. And slowly by slowly, everything that was pure, everything that was innocent, everything that was good about his previous life back home slowly starts to dwindle away.
That's a long conversation.
Want to come up and tell me?
Now? Let's talk tomorrow.
You sure?
Yeah.
But in it, there is some great dialogue that I think has so much application to the real world today. Of course, they are talking from a very nihilistic kind of worldview of humanity, but it really does kind of sum up where we've gone in the decades following on from maybe when that film or that story was first penned.
You sharpen the human appetite to the point where it can split atoms with its desire. You build egos the size of cathedrals, fiber optically connect the world to every eager impulse, grease even the dullest dreams with these dollar green, gold-plated fantasies until every human becomes an aspiring emperor, becomes his own god.
The devil never takes it by force. The devil is always there as an adversary, and a necessary adversary, a necessary evil in order to balance the properties of man. So in this instance, the devil doesn't force, or Al Pacino doesn't force Kevin to do anything that he doesn't want to do. As life is always about choices and decisions, the devil is always that character that is just offering a contract. He never takes it by force. He's never the aggressor. But understanding the carnal mind of man means that he's able to work out what is deeply in there of inside of desires and appetites, and basically goat it out or poke it out of the character. And it's a sad story in essence, because you go from, as I said, such a pure existence in the beginning, although you saw the propensities for Kevin to have this appetite for hunger and potentially not have the moral basis to even try and battle the devil. He enjoys an exchange, because in the case of an exchange, he often knows, based upon the carnal mind of man, that the exchange and the party in that transference isn't aware of the cost of the exchange or the sacrifice of the exchange, or in essence the toll of the exchange. And I guess that becomes kind of the excitement for the devil character, is that he's happy to give you what you want. We hear this all the time in pop culture, right? Selling your soul to the devil, is that you've penned on the dotted line that he will give you what you want, but there's always a sacrifice associated to it. And I guess really the common themes inside of this great film, as I said, very religious in its aspect, very much a Christian kind of worldview, however, just great storytelling, great casting and absolutely fantastic, is you've got, again, the 7 deadly sins, the gluttony, you've got the greed, you've got the envy, and you see it all play out over the course of the 2-hour film. It's talking in its symbology about the corruptibility of man's ego. That sometimes when we're not in a position to operate from any form of gratitude, or we don't have a moral principle or ethic baseline, then they're the type of people, in essence, the archetypal devil loves to play with. Because without that baseline of morality, without that baseline of ethics, without that baseline of principle, you're on the slot machines in his casino. What is Kevin's addiction? His addiction is winning. And not just winning because we all like to win, we all want to see success in our life, but it's that winning at all costs. He sits on the other side of that transference smiling because guarantee you haven't thought about the sacrifice. And because you haven't thought about the sacrifice, he's going to be there smiling at the end when you've given up something that sometimes you weren't aware. So the devil in a way is a necessary evil because he's there to regulate and to balance the properties of man's ego. We know really in life outside of the Christian or the religious worldview that anything that we want, that we truly desire, does come at some cost. There's always some form of sacrifice. So if it is to receive something, it might be kind of money orientated or business orientated. Well, there's a lot of hours and time you have to sacrifice in order to do so. If you want to be a world-class athlete, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of blood, sweat and toil that goes into that sacrifice. You don't see world-class athletes down the pub at the local Domino's. Everything is structured, everything is tailored to that goal, hence is the sacrifice. And I think a lot of the pain that comes from us in terms of regret, because I always associate the devil with regret as well, the torment, the teasing, is that if we feel that we've sacrificed something without the spoils, without the fruit, and we don't know why. So you see someone maybe on their deathbed that's looked back on their life and gone, wow, I've sacrificed all this time working. I was in the office, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and I was never there for my family. Or I let my relationships die, or I let my children down. These are all themes again of this tempter or tempting adversary force that exists. Because if you used to remake this now, well, shit, it wouldn't even have any significance, would it? People would be queuing up to work for Al Pacino. People would be lining up saying, oh, how do I sign up to this, right? It was a good story at the time because it was looking at the transition between the new age of where we are now. But if it was to be remade, I don't think it'll have as much magnitude, as much prevalence as what it did at the time. Into now, where are we now? Well, we're in this kind of nihilistic world that Al Pacino spoke about in some of those speeches. We are literally right there. Man is at his worst when he sacrifices his morality, his principles, his ethics for the fruit. Because in essence, the fruit that you've sacrificed it for will end up spoiling. So if the fruit doesn't spoil, what also might spoil is the character of man, or in the essence of this kind of story, the soul of man may be spoiled or may be corrupted. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch the film. It's 2 hours long. I've spoiled a little bit of it, but the devil's in the detail, so go and watch it. Don't be corrupted by ego. Remember, every exchange has a sacrifice, has a cost. And just go into these exchanges knowing what you're going to give up or what you're going to sacrifice. And then in essence, you've got a good deal with the devil. But it's those people that don't know about the exchange and don't know about that transference, well, they're just inviting him in to have a bit of fun. Take care.